Ida for grounding my daughter and canceling her senior trip after I found out she was cheating on her boyfriend. I have 2 daughters, Lizzie, who is 17 years old, and Mackenzie, who is 14. Their father and I went through a tumultuous divorce a few years ago, an event that shook the foundations of our family and left us grappling with a new normal. The divorce was not a decision made lightly or hastily. It came after I uncovered his betrayal, an affair that unraveled years of trust and love. The revelation was a thunderbolt that shattered my heart, leaving me to pick up the pieces for myself and our children. Since the separation, the custody arrangement has been such that the girls live with me most of the time. Their father, my ex-husband, sees them on weekends and during the summer months. It has been an uneasy equilibrium, one that I've tried to navigate with grace for the sake of Lizzie and Mackenzie, though the scars of the past linger like shadows. Lizzie, my eldest, is a bright, charismatic young woman standing on the precipice of adulthood. Over the past year, she has been dating Jacob, a boy of 18 years, who has quickly become a fixture in our home. Jacob is the kind of young man any mother would want for her daughter. He is polite, respectful, and deeply caring. His academic prowess is equally impressive. He is poised to graduate as valedictorian of their class, a testament to his hard work and intellect. His visits are frequent, and his easy smile and warm demeanor have endeared him to our family. Watching the 2 of them together laughing, holding hands, sharing inside jokes painted a picture of young love so pure it seemed almost idyllic. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect relationship, I stumbled upon a troubling discovery that left me questioning the person my daughter was becoming. A few weeks ago, as I went about my evening routine, I overheard Lizzie's voice drifting through the door of her room. She was on the phone, her tone light and playful, tinged with a flirtation that caught my attention. Initially, I assumed she was talking to Jacob, as she so often did. However, the name she uttered stopped me cold. Brandon. It was not a name I associated with Jacob. My curiosity quickly turned into a sinking feeling of dread as I pieced together the implications of her words. Could it be that Lizzie, my own daughter, was engaging in something as deceitful as infidelity? The uneasy suspicion lingered, gnawing at me. Days later, the confirmation I dreaded arrived. Lizzie casually mentioned that she was going out to meet a friend, a seemingly innocuous statement. Yet, as I watched her leave the house, curiosity compelled me to glance out the window. What I witnessed confirmed my worst fears, Lizzie climbing into a car and greeting a young man, one who was unmistakably not Jacob, with a kiss. My heart sank. The betrayal I had once endured from her father seemed to echo in the actions of my daughter, a painful reminder of the complexities and flaws of human relationships. I felt a wave of emotions crash over me, disappointment, anger, and sadness intertwined in a turbulent mix. How could Lizzie, who had grown up witnessing the consequences of betrayal, choose to walk the same path? Jacob continued to visit in the days that followed, oblivious to what I now knew. He and Lizzie maintained their routine, their interactions unchanged. The sight of them together became unbearable to me, knowing the duplicity lurking beneath the surface. I wrestled with the decision of whether to confront Lizzie, unsure if it was my place to intervene in her personal life. Yet, the moral imperative to teach her right from wrong won out. I could not stand idly by and allow such behavior to go unchecked, not when I had spent years instilling values of honesty and respect in her. What followed would set the stage for a confrontation that tested the bond between mother and daughter, a moment that forced both of us to reckon with uncomfortable truths. This was only the beginning of a storm that would challenge the very foundations of our family's integrity and love. Even after discovering Lizzie's secret, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, unable to fully process what I had witnessed. Jacob continued to visit our home as if nothing had changed. His presence was as steady and familiar as ever, and he and Lizzie behaved like a picture-perfect couple. They held hands as they sat on the couch, laughing over shared jokes and memories, completely absorbed in their own world. There was no hint of discord, no shadow of guilt in Lizzie's demeanor. To any observer, they seemed inseparable, a young couple basking in the glow of first love. But for me, the sight of them together felt like a cruel charade. Each shared laugh, each gentle touch, grated against my conscience. I knew the truth that Jacob did not, and the weight of that knowledge grew heavier with every passing day. My daughter, the girl I had raised with so much love and care, was living a double life, and Jacob, the sweet boy who had become like a member of our family, was unwittingly caught in the middle of her deception. The thought left me both angry and heartbroken. I was disgusted by her actions, unable to reconcile the values I had worked so hard to instill in her with the choices she was now making. Lizzie's ability to compartmentalize her life left me astounded. She shifted seamlessly between the role of Jacob's devoted girlfriend and her clandestine interactions with Brandon, as though she saw nothing wrong in what she was doing. I began to wonder if she truly grasped the gravity of her actions or if she had convinced herself that this duplicity was somehow justifiable. Her confidence, her calm facade, only deepened my frustration. How could she be so unaffected while I wrestled with the implications of her behavior? The situation began to gnaw at my sense of responsibility as a parent. Was I failing her? Had I not equipped her with the moral compass to understand the harm she was causing? These questions plagued me as I debated how to handle the situation. The line between respecting her autonomy as a young adult and intervening to correct her course felt razor thin. I knew that confronting her would risk further fracturing our relationship, yet silence felt like complicity. Watching Jacob, blissfully unaware of the truth, made the decision even harder. He didn't deserve this. His trust, his affection both were being taken for granted in a way that made my stomach turn. I knew that ignoring the issue would only allow it to fester, and I could no longer sit on the sidelines. My daughter needed to understand that her actions had consequences, not only for herself but for the people around her. The values I had tried to instill in her, honesty, integrity, empathy, were being trampled underfoot, and I couldn't stand by and watch it happen. It was time to confront the issue head-on, no matter how uncomfortable it might be for both of us. I resolved to speak with her, knowing that it would likely lead to a confrontation, but also understanding that avoiding it would be a greater failure as her mother. After Jacob left that day, I could no longer hold back the storm that had been brewing inside me. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, I turned to Lizzie, my heart pounding with a mix of anger, disappointment, and sadness. I asked her point blank, the words tumbling out of my mouth with a force I couldn't temper, "Are you cheating on your boyfriend with another guy?" For a moment, she froze, caught off guard by the directness of my question. But then her expression hardened, and her response came, cold and defiant, "It's none of your business. My personal life is mine." Her words hit me like a slap. My daughter, the girl I had raised with so much care and love, was standing before me, dismissing my concern as though it were an unwelcome intrusion. I took a deep breath, struggling to steady my voice as I replied, "You're wrong, Lizzie. This is my business. I raised you better than this. I taught you to treat people with respect, to value honesty and integrity. What you're doing, this isn't right." She crossed her arms, her posture radiating defiance. "I'm bored with Jacob," she said bluntly. "He's sweet and all, but Brandon is more my type. I don't even know if I want to be with Brandon, though. Maybe I'm just having fun flirting and teasing." Her words cut deep, not just because of what they revealed about her actions, but because of the casualness with which she dismissed the hurt she was causing. I could see no remorse in her eyes, no acknowledgement of the pain her choices might inflict on Jacob. It was as if she saw the situation as a game, a harmless exploration of her own desires, without regard for the consequences. I tried to remain calm, though every fiber of my being was screaming with frustration. "Lizzie," I said, my voice firm but measured, "if you are not happy with Jacob, you need to end things with him. It's not fair to him, and it's not fair to yourself to carry on this way. Cheating is never acceptable. It's wrong, and it's hurtful. You need to take responsibility for your actions." Her reaction was dismissive, almost flippant. "I don't know what I want yet," she said. Why can't I just figure it out on my own without you getting involved? Because this isn't just about you, I replied, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay composed. Your choices affect other people. Jacob trusts you. He cares about you. And you're betraying that trust. I can't just stand by and watch you do this. The conversation escalated from there, our voices growing louder as we each dug in our heels. Lizzie accused me of being overbearing, of not understanding what it was like to be her age. I countered that it wasn't about her age, but about character and values. Finally, I made the decision that I knew would ignite her fury. I grounded her. I told her she would not be allowed to go on her senior trip with her friends, a consequence that I hoped would drive home the seriousness of her actions. Lizzie exploded. Her anger was palpable, her words sharp and cutting as she railed against the unfairness of my decision. She accused me of trying to control her life, of punishing her out of spite. Her words stung, but I held my ground, unwilling to let her behavior go unchecked. Actions have consequences, Lizzie, I said, my voice steady even as my heart ached. You made a choice, and now you have to face the results of that choice. For the next 2 days, our home was a battlefield of silence and tension. Lizzie barely spoke to me, retreating to her room or leaving the house entirely. Then, without warning, she packed a bag and went to stay at her dad's place. I wasn't surprised by her decision. She had always sought refuge with him when she felt wronged by me. What did surprise me was the phone call I received from my ex-husband shortly after she arrived. You're being unreasonable, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. You're overreacting to a high school relationship. It's just a phase, something kids go through. You need to put your bitterness aside and stop punishing our daughter. His words ignited a fresh wave of anger in me. This isn't about bitterness, I shot back. This is about teaching Lizzie right from wrong. She's old enough to understand that her actions have consequences. What she's doing isn't just a phase. It's hurtful, and it's wrong. She's a teenager, he argued. She's figuring things out. You can't just ground her and ban her from her senior trip because of one mistake. One mistake? I echoed, incredulous. This isn't a mistake. It's a choice. A deliberate choice to lie and cheat. And if we don't hold her accountable now, what kind of adult are we setting her up to be? The conversation devolved into a heated argument, with neither of us willing to concede our stance. My ex-husband accused me of being rigid and unyielding, while I accused him of enabling Lizzie's behavior. By the time we hung up, I felt more isolated than ever, caught between my desire to protect my daughter and my obligation to guide her toward becoming a person of integrity. Lizzie remained at her dad's house for the next several days, a silence settling over our home that was both a relief and a sorrow. I missed her presence, but I couldn't ignore the sense of betrayal that lingered in the air. I knew this was far from over. The choices Lizzie had made and the consequences she now faced were ripples in a larger current, one that would continue to shape our family's dynamic in ways I could only begin to imagine. As the days passed, the weight of the situation pressed heavily on me. The conversation with my ex-husband echoed in my mind, his words a frustrating blend of dismissal and justification. He called Lizzie's relationship with Jacob just a high school thing, as though it held no significance, as though her actions carried no real consequences. It was a perspective I couldn't reconcile with my own. To me, this wasn't about teenage relationships or fleeting moments. It was about the foundation of character, the values that would guide her through life long after high school was a memory. His insistence that I put my bitterness aside felt like a slap, a gross misinterpretation of my intentions. This wasn't about the past or the pain he had caused me. This was about my daughter and the kind of person she was becoming. I tried to explain this to him, to articulate the depth of my concern. This isn't about bitterness, I told him firmly. This is about teaching Lizzie that her choices matter, that the way she treats people matters. If we don't hold her accountable now, we're failing her as parents. Actions have consequences, and she needs to understand that. He sighed, his frustration palpable even through the phone. She's a teenager, he said, as though that absolved her of responsibility. She's going to make mistakes. You can't punish her for being young. I'm not punishing her for being young, I countered, my voice sharp with conviction. I'm holding her accountable for her choices. If she doesn't learn that now, when will she? This isn't just about Jacob or Brandon. It's about integrity, about respect. Those lessons don't start when she turns 18. They start now. But my words fell on deaf ears. He dismissed my concerns with a wave of indifference, choosing instead to focus on what he saw as my overreaction. You're being too hard on her, he said, his tone laced with condescension. You're going to push her away if you keep this up. The conversation ended without resolution, leaving me feeling more alone than ever. I was caught between my ex-husband's leniency and my own unwavering belief that Lizzie needed to face the consequences of her actions. The silence that followed was deafening, a void filled with unanswered questions and unspoken fears. Lizzie remained at her father's house, her absence a constant reminder of the rift that had formed between us. I missed her presence, her laughter, the way she used to fill the house with her energy. But I also knew that this time apart was necessary. She needed space to reflect, to understand the gravity of her actions. And I needed time to prepare for the difficult road ahead. The days stretched into a week, then two, and still, Lizzie stayed away. When she finally returned, it was with a guarded demeanor, her walls firmly in place. She spoke to me only when necessary, her tone clipped and distant. It was a painful change, but one I had anticipated. I knew that rebuilding our relationship would take time, that trust and understanding couldn't be forced. In the weeks that followed, I noticed small changes in Lizzie. She spent less time on her phone, her laughter quieter, her demeanor more subdued. Jacob stopped coming over, and though Lizzie never spoke of him, I sensed that their relationship had ended. Whether she had broken up with him or he had discovered the truth and walked away, I didn't know. What I did know was that Lizzie was carrying the weight of her choices, and for the first time, I saw glimpses of the reflection and accountability I had hoped for. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, the silence between us was broken by a hesitant voice. "Mom," she said, her words tentative, "I've been thinking about what you said. About actions having consequences. And I think you're right. I wasn't fair to Jacob. Or to myself." Her admission caught me off guard, a crack in the armor she had built around herself. I turned to her, my heart swelling with a mix of relief and pride. "Lizzie," I said gently, "it takes courage to admit when you've made a mistake. I'm proud of you for recognizing that." She nodded, her eyes downcast. "I don't know if I'll ever make it right with him," she said softly. "But I'm going to try to do better. To be better." In that moment, I saw not just my daughter but a young woman beginning to find her way, learning the hard truths of life and love. It wasn't an easy journey, and there would undoubtedly be more mistakes, more lessons to learn. But it was a start, a step toward the person I knew she could become. As I held her hand and listened to her speak, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Parenthood was never about perfection, it was about persistence, about guiding our children through the storms of life and helping them find their way to calmer waters. Lizzie's journey was far from over, but in that moment, I knew we were moving in the right direction, together.